Okay, now I want to go over some cleanup stuff when it comes to acrylic paint especially. Okay, if you're wrapped up and you have water that you're cleaning water, that can go in the sink. Okay, so that can go in the sink, but you want to make sure there's not chunks or anything in there, and you want to rinse it out repeatedly. Let the water run for a second so that it actually flushes it out. Okay, I want to show you my sink real quick. I know my painting students didn't do this, but this is actually after I had an aide help me scrape out paint and everything that had been on there. Totally unacceptable. Also this morning I found paper towels in here. And as you can see, there's paint that is dried to the surface here. I'll tell you why this is happening and why it's never going to happen in our class. The paint that dries on the surface is annoying here. But where it gets really dangerous is there's, I'm sure, also paint that is down the sink that has now dried to the walls of it. At the end of last school year, I spent 2 days literally pulling apart my entire sink, pulling apart all the pieces, and literally pulling hair and paint out because it had completely jammed up my sink. Drano didn't work, paint thinners didn't work. I had to go in and manually pull out all of the garbage. That's not going to happen this year because you are never, ever, 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 ever going to put your paint down the sink. If you've got paint on your palette still, what should I do, Mr. Baggett? You will first go to a trash can and you will wipe out your excess paint into the trash bin. Okay? That is if you're not going to save it. If you're going to save it and put a lid on it, that's a different story. But if you're done painting and you're doing a cleanup, you're using paper towels, use as many as you like, and you're wiping it out real good. Wipe off everything you can, or peel it off, but you're going to get as much out of that as you possibly can. I'm going to do this a second time. Leave yourself time at the end of class to be able to do a proper cleanup. That's why we have a 10-minute bell. Okay. At this point, I've wiped out basically all the paint. There is still a little coloration there, but there's very, very little paint left on this thing. At this point, now I can actually wash out my palette. There's soap, there's paper towels still. No problem. Depending on how OCD you are, you can get every little speck out if you want. That's really the proper thing to do. Okay? But now we have no problem with paint in the sink, which is what we need. No paint in the sink. Obviously, not all my students do this. Your palette is your own. You do have the option with acrylic paint also, and it dries. A lot of times you can peel it out. This is far less convenient than just taking care of it while it's still wet. But but this is also an option, not in the sink. Bottom line is, if I see that cleanup with acrylic is a problem, then we will not do acrylic or any of the advanced painting mediums. We'll just go to watercolor. And that's not an empty threat. I've done it with students in the past. They couldn't handle acrylic, so we just did watercolor for the entire year. So that is the situation. That's proper cleanup. Let me show you one or two more things. Brushes. Notice in my paintbrush here that the paint only came to about halfway down the brush. You never, ever, 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 ever want the paint to get to here. And here's why. When you go to clean this brush, you will never get the paint out of it if it's all the way down in here. The paint will get in there, it will dry, and it will fan out the brush so that you no longer have a nice crisp edge on it, and the brush will be ruined. Take a guess as to how many times you can forget to wash your brush before the brush is ruined. If you guessed once, you're right. If you don't properly clean your brush after every painting session, the brush will be ruined forever. And it's very expensive to continually buy brushes. Okay? A single brush isn't that expensive, but when you're talking for every single student, it adds up very, very quickly. So let's talk about how to properly wash the brush real quick. There's still like quite a bit of paint on my brush here. What should I do first? Should I wash it down the sink? No. I should wipe out as much as I can. Obviously going the same direction as the bristles, not opposite. You don't want to scrunch them up. You want to keep this thing wet always. If you're painting and you're not using it immediately, it goes in your water cup. Because if it dries, then it's over. Alright, when you clean out a brush, it is not enough to rinse it. See how I'm kind of like fanning the brush gently open? That helps me to get all of the paint that's out that's in between those brushes as well. It is best also to use a little bit of soap. If you're using oil paints, you're going to need not just water, but paint thinner to actually clean your brushes. Water will not clean out oil paint because oil is resistant to water. Acrylics, water works just fine. Okay, this is still in proper condition. Some types of paint or ink will actually stain the bristles, but you'll know the difference. Like the very tips of this brush is a little bit stained, but that is not actual paint in there. It's just a little bit of the pigment. This brush is still in really good shape. I want to keep it in really good shape. I'm never going to store it with the brushes down because that will bend them. I want them to be in good position, and then I'll set it up to dry. Okay. So that's proper brush management. All of these things are a necessity every single time you paint, so give yourself time for proper setup and proper takedown. Trash your extra paint, put it in the trash, not the sink. Okay? The sink is only for just the final cleanup with just the little bit of paint that's left over after you wipe it down. Okay?